All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone on Facebook and at conduitnews.com. Anyone watching over at YouTube, this is Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and this is Josh Waters here today filling in with Paul, and we got Joe here filling in as well as we kind of do a year in review today. Paul will be back next Wednesday on January 2nd, but we got a really good show for you today, kind of highlighting some of the top interviews this year that Paul did right here on Conduit News Radio. But while we got just the online audience right now, what I wanted to do, give a little time for people to come on. They're still coming on and coming back from Christmas. Hope everyone had a very, very Merry Christmas. But I wanted to take this time to encourage people to go out and subscribe to the Patreon for Conduit News. That is a way you can financially support Conduit News Radio and help build the Liberty machine here in Arkansas. And so what I wanted to do was just kind of pull up the website here for a minute and just show how you can do that. It's very easy. I'm a Patreon subscriber myself. It's just you set it up one time, your $5, $10, $25 a month contribution. But the way you do this is if you're sitting at your computer right now, just open another tab up and go to www.conduitnews.com. That's www.conduitnews.com. And when you're there, you'll see at the very, very top of the banner bar, you'll see Home, About, Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and then you'll see a button that says Support. Click the Support button right there. Okay? And when you click the Support button, you'll see there's 3 different tiers about how you can become a patron and help support Conduit News Radio. You know, there's a lot of things we can give our money away to, but what better way than to support the conservative messaging here at Conduit News through Patreon. There's a lot of people out there who are already Patreon subscribers, and we thank you for your support. But consider today going on conduitnews.com, clicking on Support at the top of the page, and you can become a Liberty Machine engineer for $5 a month. Or $10 a month, the Conduit News Radio producer.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, Arkansas. Good morning. I hope everyone had a very, very Merry Christmas, and as a lot of people are heading back to work today, this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell on Conduit News Radio this morning. Paul will be back next week in the new year on January 2nd. But we got a really good show for you today and tomorrow. What we're going to do, Joe and I are here in studio, and we're just going to go back kind of through some of the best interviews of the whole year. We went back through, kind of combed the archives and thought, man, that was a really great interview that stood out. And so we're going to be playing those throughout the show today and tomorrow, and also talking about some of the top stories of 2018 in Arkansas news and politics. So if you have a top story that stands out to you and be like, man, that was the number one news story, that was the number one story in politics this year, be sure to send a text message to 870-275-9799. We want to hear from you and kind of, engage with the conversation and prompt some discussion maybe. If you're listening on Facebook, welcome to the show. Type there in the comments what some of your top stories were that you thought really stood out to you in 2018. And as we close down and head into the new year, A lot is in store for 2019 with Conduit News Radio and Paul Harrell. But we just also want to, hope everyone had a very Merry Christmas. I know a lot of people have been traveling, spending time with family. I've actually been up here in Jonesboro spending time with family, and that's been really good. And, as we're kind of closing down Christmas time, though, we did want to share a video with you from Paul. It's a Merry Christmas message called The Perfect Gospel. And this video, just to let you know, too, was first published on the Patreon page. And for those that are unfamiliar with what Patreon is, it's a way that you, as an individual, can financially support causes that you believe in. And Conduit News has a Patreon page. And we're talking with the online audience just before we went live over the terrestrial radio stations. And we were showing them, how you can easily go to conduitnews.com. That's conduitnews.com. You want to click another tab open and go and click on the support tab at the top of the homepage there. And you'll see 3 different tiers of options to become a Patreon subscriber. I'm a Patreon subscriber, and what that is, it's a way you can financially support the Liberty Machine in Arkansas and support Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. There's 3 different giving levels. You can do $5 a month, $10 a month, or $25 a month. And, that's just a really great way we can invest in our future here in Arkansas, that we can have a more prosperous Arkansas. And so this first video was a Patreon video. It's one of the examples of what you would be getting as exclusive extra videos from Paul Harrell. And so we wanted to share that with the entire audience this morning, though, as we remember really what the only meaning, true meaning of Christmas is. So this is a video from Paul called The Perfect Gospel, and it's a Merry Christmas message from him. We hope you all had a very Merry Christmas, and we'll play that video now.
Hey folks, I wanted to say Merry Christmas, and I wanted to take a little time today to talk about why we celebrate Christmas. One of my favorite ways to look at Christmas is to go back and reflect on all of the amazing things throughout history, throughout biblical history, that led to the point of Mary and Joseph walking on a road to Bethlehem because, of all things, a census had been decreed, and they had to go back to their hometown. Everything that happened after that, I think we know the story pretty well. But generally, all the things that happened before, they're just, first of all, immense. All the things that God was doing for a people to call his own. All the things that God was doing to redeem mankind. Most of the time throughout history, the people involved, the men and women on the ground, could only see a few of those things. And they could not see all of the other things that were going on that God was doing and 100% in charge of. And oftentimes, that can be very confusing as we live our lives from day to day now, but that is still going on now. So I thought I would hit some of the high points. Several years ago, I made a slide presentation for my family, something that I wanted to do on Christmas Eve. We have typically a large family gathering where we talk about, we have a big dinner, have a big meal, and afterwards we eventually read the Christmas story. But before we did that, I wanted to do a presentation just on things that I had learned in my biblical studies and my own pursuits. I wanted to hit the high points of the history of the Bible leading up to this pivotal moment in human history. Not as pivotal as the cross and the resurrection, but certainly. I mean, I would honestly amend that. Just as important. It's part of an entire beautiful, perfect plan. The plan of the gospel. So without further ado, shall we? Let's get to it. So in order to figure out how to best appreciate what happens in the manger in Bethlehem, I think we have to start at the beginning. We have to look at the gospel in its entirety. And so in order to do that, we have to start with creation, right? That's right. In creation, God created man. God created this earth. We were created to worship him and enjoy him forever. And then something happened. So, but initially, God was with us. So we and the earth were perfect. The meaning of harmony was first realized, was first ever thought, created in terms of our relationship with God, Adam and Eve's. But then something happened not too long after things got rolling. They had the fall of man, Genesis 3:15. At the time, I was reading the NASB, and now I'm more of an ESV guy. But hey, you know what? Everybody grows. Genesis 3:15 is actually the first gospel message that is ever spoken in the Bible. The first time it's spoken is when God looks at Eve, and he looks at the serpent, or Satan, and he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. Next, what are the high points? We have the flood. We have the corruption of mankind. We have Noah's Ark, God's judgment on the world. Then after that, we have the Tower of Babel. Now, there's a lot of stuff I'm skipping over here, but we're told to go forth and multiply, and instead, man in his wisdom apart from God, it's not really wisdom, it's folly, and his disobedience, we decided to form a superstate. Nimrod decided to be the world's first dictator. See here, there's severe supernatural demonic activity going on. Some even speculate that the Tower of Babel was actually just an astrological temple, more than it was a literal tower to heaven, if you will. More like the heavenly places referred to in the book of Ephesians, not an actual, ladder, if you will, to heaven. Then we have the call of Abraham. Praise God for the call of Abraham this Christmas. Now the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. Next up, we have, skipping over some things, a lot of good story, but a high point, the exodus from slavery. See, back in Genesis, the favored son Joseph was sold into slavery and left for dead. God kept his promises, and descendants of Abraham flourished. Then you got a new Pharaoh, a Pharaoh who did not remember Joseph. And the foreigners were doing pretty good, very prosperous in a foreign land, and so they enslaved them. And then you have a very familiar story here for a second with Moses versus the birth of Christ. Very familiar. That we need to kill all firstborn Jewish males. But God saved Moses and had much bigger plans for him. And he kept his promise. God is a promise keeper. Skipping over, again, a lot of really good stories. We have the birth of a nation, Israel. And then we skip over some more, and we get to the zenith of the kingdom, which would be the kingdom of David. Israel at its finest. God's covenant with David. The prophet Nathan told him a message from God. I will make you a great name, like the names of the great men who are on the earth. Your house and your kingdom shall endure before me forever. Your throne shall be established forever. What an incredible promise. But what does it mean? And now that the promise is known, what might some do to thwart such a promise and try to make God a liar. This is the Davidic covenant. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall rest upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and the peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. Isaiah 9, 6 through 7. By the way, Isaiah translated into Greek 300 years before the birth of Christ. Now, I want to take a moment here and address something. I talk a lot in my professional career about government and how we should govern ourselves. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as a Christian, at heart, I'm a monarchist. I'm a monarchist who is desperately craving not only to see the king with my own eyes, but to serve him and to see his kingdom and government be fully realized, where in the Bible it says that the knowledge of the Lord is known throughout the entire world, meaning there is no dispute who's in charge. There is no dispute or other side of the story, or right, left, conservative, liberal, Democrat, whatever. There is only one truth and source of it, and that is the government that I long to see. And that's why Christmas is so important, because it's the beginning of the culmination of getting to that point. We're not there yet, but we will be. We will be. So keep in mind, Isaiah translated into Greek 300 years before the birth of Christ. Okay, now moving on. And then we have this little prophecy, Isaiah 7, 10 through 14. Then the Lord spoke again to Ahaz, saying, Ask a sign for yourself from the Lord, your God. Make it deep as Sheol or as high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I test the Lord. Then he said, Listen now, O house of David. Is it too slight a thing for you to try the patience of men, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. Again, Isaiah, written 300 years. We found copies in the book of Isaiah, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yep. Those that book predates, and it matches up exactly with modern copies. Well, I think it actually differed like what, four or five letters difference than what they currently had at the time when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah. Then we have this little thing. I mean, look at Joseph. This is the earthly father of Jesus, not biological, but his earthly dad here, Joseph. You have David, you have Solomon. That's David's son. And isn't it interesting that Joseph is from the throne of David? Huh. And there's one little problem here. You see, in the history of Israel, I said that earlier that when David was king, that was the zenith of the kingdom. Well, it just kind of went downhill from there. I mean, there were some good kings after David. Josiah rediscovered the law, that sort of thing. But it just got to a point where the kings of the south just went from bad to worse. It got so bad that the Lord wrote Jeconiah, also known in your Bible as Conia or Jehoiachin. This is what he says in Jeremiah 22:30. Thus saith the Lord, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days, for no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David, and ruling any more in Judah. For no man of his seed. Well, that would include Joseph, wouldn't it? And if that includes Joseph, wow. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that this was an attempt to conflict with that verse all the way in Genesis 3:15 and all those verses about the Davidic covenant. That's interesting. Seems like there was something that forces of evil didn't know, though, right? Maybe. But according to that verse, Joseph is cursed, and his seed won't be allowed to sit on the throne of David. So what are the reasons for the virgin birth? Well, I have just, this is now more of a reason for the virgin birth, by the way. This analysis here is more of a reason for why you had the virgin birth. Now, I'm not saying it's the reason. I just say, see how this all works out. I imagine some people thought that this was a way to prove God a liar. But God is awesome, and his plans for redemption are perfect because he is the ultimate sovereign. Next. What about the house of David, though? Well, David had another son besides Solomon, and his name was Nathan. As we see in the line, according to Matthew and then according to Luke, Nathan, eventually, his offspring have a woman named Mary, who was Jesus' mother, and a descendant from the throne of David. Which brings us to this. The Christmas story. God born of man. He became poor so we might become rich. Let us celebrate the second Adam. Let us celebrate this Christmas our King, our kinsman Redeemer, the King of kings, the Lord of lords, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the earth. Merry Christmas from me to you. God bless you who are listening to this. God bless you and your family. Thank you.
All right, that was Paul Harrell with a Merry Christmas gospel message. You know, the true and only meaning of Christmas is the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, and his birth at Christmas time is what we celebrate and what we worship. And so that was really refreshing to hear from Paul. And even though it's, a couple days after Christmas, the gospel should live out in all of us each and every day. So we're going to take a break right now, though. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and we'll be back with more after this.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
I want to welcome back to the program. We have Congressman Bruce Westerman is with us. Merry Christmas to you, Bruce.
Merry Christmas to you too, Paul. Now, how does a guy follow Johnny Cash singing "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day" and then talking about the reason for the season and Christ's birth, and then go into politics?
I know, right?
You're setting it up tough for me this morning, Paul.
It is. It is tough, and it really and truly. I'll be honest with you. I've been reading a lot in the book of Ecclesiastes, and when Solomon talks about, it's all his vanity and his grasping at the wind, and I'm just, I really, that's the way I feel about the political environment right now, and apparently nothing's new under the sun. So, Congress,
doesn't he finish? Doesn't he finish that by saying, "All is vain"?
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal.
Ethics.
Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
All right, good morning, everyone. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. We're recapping some of the top interviews and top stories that you heard right here on Conduit News Radio for 2018. We just heard a great Merry Christmas message about the gospel from Paul. And as a reminder, that was an exclusive Patreon video originally. And you can go and sign up for Patreon at conduitnews.com/support. And it's a way you can, invest in the show. If you see value in what Conduit News Radio and Paul Harrell do, you can go and donate. I'm a Patreon subscriber, and I encourage everyone out there listening to go and become a Patreon subscriber. We're going to have to take another break here in just a couple of seconds, but stay tuned. We got some great top interviews and top stories of 2018 right after this break.
Except to fear God and obey His commands.
Yes.
That's how he wraps that up.
You're exactly right. It's the entire theme of the book, from what I can tell, is life is meaningless, but God gives it meaning. I mean, that seems to be what it is. It's like left by ourselves. I mean, we're just left to toil under the sun, and it's kind of a miserable existence. But God is the one that makes it better and gives us purpose.
That's pretty much the story of life, I believe.
Yeah, it really is.
Story of Christmas and the whole, all wrapped into one.
Yeah, man, that's good. Well, to, I guess, devolve the conversation that right now is certainly more enlightening than it's going to be. What's going on in Washington, D.C.? I know President Trump, did he call Speaker Ryan in the middle of your conference yesterday? Tell us how those events unfolded.
Yeah, so we were having our conference meeting. That's where all the Republicans get together the morning after we fly in for votes. So we were having that meeting, and it's where we kind of lay out the game plan and what's going to happen. And the Senate had passed that continuing resolution without any funding for the wall in it, and that didn't sit very well with our conference. So there was it's supposed to be a 1-hour conference, and in an hour and a half to 2 hours, we were still going strong, debating why this wasn't the right thing to do. And it was about that time that Paul Ryan had to step out and take a call from the president, and then he and Kevin McCarthy went over to the White House, and the next thing you know, we got a bill we got the Senate's bill, and we're amending it to put disaster relief funding for some of the coastal states, Florida and Georgia, from the hurricanes, which, that hurricane damage down there was catastrophic, and it's just really not been in the news that much. But lots and lots of damage done down there, and plus the wildfires out in California. So there were a lot of members that didn't want to leave before Christmas without doing something on the disaster relief, and also there was a lot who didn't want to pass up this opportunity to do more for.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, good morning and welcome back. If you're just tuning in, this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell this morning on Conduit News Radio. And what we're doing today and tomorrow, Joe and I are here in the studio, and we're just recapping some of the top interviews and top stories of 2018. So if you have a top story, what was the biggest thing that stood out to you in Arkansas politics maybe in 2018? Send us a text message at 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you remember back several months ago, Paul had a very, very special guest on Conduit News Radio. It was Judge Jeanine Pirro from Fox News. And she came on and she was actually talking about her book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. I actually went out and bought that book and read it, and it was really interesting. I had, no idea she had a kind of a personal, friendship with President Donald Trump before he even got into politics and ran for president, and really detailed her background as an attorney, as a prosecutor, and later as a judge, and now as a Fox News television host. And so a very interesting book, but she came on, and what I remember a lot about that day, Joe, is how she came on this show on Conduit News Radio, I think about 7:30, and within an hour she was trending on Twitter because her and Whoopi Goldberg got on it on The View. And so I guess, everyone uses Conduit News Radio as a stepping stone to The View and to be trending on Twitter is what I took from that. Yeah. So, but it was a really good interview. It's always great, to hear from her. I think she makes a lot of sense, and, she knows what she's talking about. She has a lot of experience in the legal field, and she knows, Donald Trump personally, President Trump personally. And so it was cool to read her book and get her insight. But she did come on Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and we wanted to replay that interview in case you might have missed it, been out that day. And so this is an interview with Judge Jeanine Pirro with Conduit News Radio host Paul Harrell about her book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals.
It came out this week. It's called Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, the Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. And joining us on the phone, we have the author of that book, Judge Jeanine Pirro, is on the program. Judge Jeanine, it's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you.
Yes, ma'am. I am so glad that you wrote this book. I've been doing some research about it. And I imagine because we live in these interesting times, it was a pleasure to write about President Donald Trump. Is he an interesting man to write about?
Well, he certainly is. He's a man I've known for many decades. And he was a man who was a successful businessman. He was successful on television, and the press, the media loved him. Cameos in movies. They couldn't stop writing about him. And then he announced he was running for president. He became the devil incarnate. The left, from the time he took office, has been having a collective breakdown. They blew their collective gasket. And now they've been trying to take him out of office. And because I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years, I know the crime business. I've been in it a long time, and I know a con when I see it. And what they did with this president and continue to do was they set up a fake investigation with a make-believe dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton, the opposing political party, started an investigation, and this president for 19 months has been under an investigation that has shown nothing connected to him, and, they will not stop. It is part of the lying-seeking liberal left that just won't quit, and that's why I wrote the book. I thought it was important, and I outlined all of this in the book.
I understand that, again, your book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, you do discuss Peter Strzok. But interesting, you wrote about him before his recent testimony before Congress. So I'm just curious, did his testimony surprise you, or did you pretty much have him pegged?
You know, I'm very impressed. You really did read the book. Yeah, I did. I think the book actually is almost prescient because I had not heard Peter Strzok, nor did anyone, in general, the public here, until he testified last Thursday. The guy was smug, arrogant, condescending, defiant, unapologetic, all of the things that you would expect based on the emails with his lover, Lisa Page. But the interesting part of it all is he said, well, it's like one of those, don't believe your lying eyes. I said that the guy would destabilize the country. I said we'll have to stop him. And I talked about an insurance policy, which we now know is the Russia collusion in the event he was elected. But don't believe anything I said. It was late. It appears that his girlfriend, Lisa Page, now testifying behind closed doors, is taking him on with respect to what his intent was. And look, I've worked with FBI agents. I've worked with police my whole life. I had an office with 50 law enforcement cops who worked with me. And I love law enforcement. I have tremendous respect. And the shame of this is that they have to hang their heads because people at the top of the FBI, McCabe, Comey, Strzok, Witwicky, Baker, all these guys were involved in an attempted coup. And, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but, man, they ripped those bandages off so that they could investigate this man and impeach him. And from the time Donald Trump got there was anything that he's done right to them. And I write in the book about all the good stuff. Not a single metric is worse under Donald Trump. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is defeated. There's deregulation. Businesses are being expanded. Tax reform. Americans have more money in their pockets now. And they hate the man. But, anyone at the tip of the spear knows there's going to be pushback, but there isn't a better person to push back than Donald Trump.
That's for sure. And it seems like I was just saying before you came on, it seems like every time the deep state or the media sets these traps for him, eventually they fall into their own nets. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. Now, you mentioned, having offices next to some of these people throughout your career. Speaking of leakers, you talk about FBI former director James Comey. I understand you used to work, close to him. Your offices were right next to each other. And tell me about Cardinal Comey. Tell me about this name, Cardinal Comey. What does that mean?
Well, I knew James Comey. I was the elected DA in Westchester County. He was the United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time. And our offices were next to each other. And, I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants. All the while, she destroys evidence, sleeps bed, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. They call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I suggest FBI is best friends with the FBI because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything, and now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're a leaker. I could go on, but you got to get my book. Liars, Leakers, and Liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Jeanine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there was some
trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen, they were going to make it really, really difficult and give the media all of the fodder they needed to try to paint this concept of collusion. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that Mueller announced those indictments 3 days before the Helsinki meeting?
I like you. No, it's no coincidence. Of course, they decided to say we're indicting 12 Russians. Well, if you recall, they indicted 13 a few months back, having nothing to do with Donald Trump or collusion. They indicted a total of 25 Russians, or charged them, who will never be extradited, never be arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted, or sentenced. I mean, what is the point? It just keeps it in the news, and they're trying to get Donald Trump off his game. But as I say in the book, the man's a force of nature. He can walk into a den of lions and come out the winner. He has no fear. He takes incoming every day for the American people. And when you think about it, that guy could be in Scotland right now. He could have stayed in Scotland and kept playing golf. But he doesn't. He does it for us. And I'm honestly sick and tired of the attempt to destroy this man. I get politics. I've run for office 5 times, PA, and a county judge and all that. But this is beyond the pale. They're calling for treason, sedition, because, he didn't take Putin out on stage when in truth, no one has had more severe sanctions on Russia. We're arming the Ukrainians against the Russians. Barack Obama stood and watched while the Russians annexed Crimea, and right now, what we're doing with Crimea is we're helping them to be able to, defend themselves. And the other piece on the Russia piece is that we got mass sanctions because of Crimea. We killed hundreds of Russians in Syria, and then Obama just talked about the red line. We've expelled Russians from the U.S. We're increasing missile defense in the intel community. I mean, not what you say, it's what you do.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It's almost like they wanted a boxing match up there in that press conference, and they didn't get it. And it's quite, you mentioned treason. They're now claiming that a diplomatic meeting was treason, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty low bar. I mean, if that's the bar you're going to set, what was the Hillary Clinton Uranium One debacle? I mean, wasn't that then treason?
Oh, yeah, the sale of 20% of all uranium to the Russians was when the Clinton Foundation gets a $145 million kickback. Bill gets a quick $500 cash for a 20-minute speech in Russia. You want to talk about collusion? How about we talk about the fact that the effort on the part of Russia to access our uranium, which was all about bribery and corruption, indeed, they found Hillary Clinton. And that case is a case that was handled by Rod Rosenstein, and Rod Rosenstein is the one now heading the Russian investigation when he knows full well what happened. But he got Jeff Sessions to recuse himself, and Jeff, I haven't seen him in a while. He must be hiding in the closet somewhere. But, Jeff Sessions is not doing his job, and it's a shame because the American people are entitled to an attorney general who's doing his job and not someone who's going to take it and then recuse himself a day later.
Judge Jeanine Pirro, I so appreciate you coming on the program. It's been great to meet you. Again, your book, it's available in bookstores. It's available on Amazon. It's Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. Judge Jeanine Pirro, thank you so much for spending the morning with us.
Oh, I love spending the morning out there. I really do. And I thank you and your listeners. Have a great day.
Okay, you
Bye-bye.
too. Judge Jeanine Pirro, everybody. You can catch her weekends on Fox News, her show, her monologues. Judge Jeanine's monologues are some of the best, most passionate. And here's the thing. I understand she writes every one of those herself. Did you know that? We're going to take a break, folks. This is Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment.
All right, welcome back again. That was Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell and Judge Jeanine Pirro a few months ago. And if you're just joining us, this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell this morning. And what we're doing today and tomorrow is we're just recapping some of the top stories and showing some of the top interviews heard right here on Conduit News Radio. And that video and all these interviews that we're going to be showing over the next couple of days, they're available anytime over at the Conduit News YouTube page. So if you just go to youtube.com and search Conduit News, you can pull that right up. You can subscribe. And every day, every interview that is done, it is clipped out. So if you don't have time to watch the full 2-hour show, and you have a favorite person you want to go and listen to an interview for, you can get all the clips there over at the YouTube page for Conduit News. And then over at conduitnews.com, all the same content is available, as well as the podcast. If you're an audio-only listener, you can get the Apple Podcast. A great way to listen. So there's so many ways you can consume the content with Conduit News, and so that you're informed and up to date on what is going on. First of all, in your name at the Marble Palace in Little Rock and Arkansas politics, but even more than that, what's going on a national stage, and how does that impact Arkansas? Paul has national guests on a lot, and they talk about some national news stories, but then it's always related back to Arkansas and how it may affect you. So we're going to go ahead and take a break right here, but stay tuned. We have a really cool interview coming up here in a minute, an exclusive interview with Congressman Devin Nunes when he came to Arkansas a few months ago. So we'll play that right after this break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
So we ended up putting those amendments on the bill and sending it back to the Senate last night. Some of them had already gone home, so I guess they're traveling back up here today. But the ball's kind of in the Senate's court. And as you know, it takes 60 votes to do anything in the Senate. I think Steve Daines and the president have both been tweeting this morning about how they should do the what they call the nuclear option, but remove the rule that requires 60 votes to have a vote and go ahead and vote on this funding bill. But a lot of drama playing out, and we're just here on hold in the House right now, waiting to see what the Senate's reaction will be.
You know, it's been a wild 48 hours. There was a lot of people that thought President Trump was not going to blink, and then it seemed like he acquiesced. But then that wasn't the case. Now, I mean, he essentially said, look, I'm going to veto a bill if it doesn't have adequate funding for border security.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. If you're just joining us, we're recapping some of the top stories and top interviews that you heard right here on Conduit News this year with Paul Harrell. And one we want to go over next is an exclusive interview. You probably saw him, if you watch Fox News at all, you saw Congressman Devin Nunes. But when he came to Arkansas, the exclusive interview that he did was with Conduit News Radio's own Paul Harrell when he was in town for Jonesboro. And so we wanted to share that interview in case you missed it. And so this is an exclusive interview with Paul Harrell and Congressman Devin Nunes.
Chairman Devin Nunes of the House Intelligence Committee is in Arkansas. So what brings you to Arkansas, Chairman Devin Nunes?
Well, it's great to be here, with you, with great people. So to have Rick Crawford, Congressman Crawford, who's one of my close allies in the House. He's on the House Intelligence Committee along with the Agriculture Committee, but we work closely on the House Intelligence Committee together. And then, of course, French Hill, who's from the other part of the state, but he was here too. It's great to see both of them. And great to be out here to support them.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that French Hill race, I've been talking a lot about that. And if the Make America Great Again agenda is going to continue, then French Hill has to go back to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and look, this is we've had this before where people come in and they kind of pretend they don't call themselves socialists, they don't call themselves left-wing, they don't talk about any policies, they don't admit that they'll vote for Nancy Pelosi. But I'm from California. I've seen Nancy Pelosi in action. We don't want her back here. Right. We don't want her back in Washington. And so I think French is going to do well because he's a very solid vote, a very solid member, has good constituent service, and just an all-around good guy. So I think the left nationwide, they're sending money from San Francisco, Hollywood, New York City. But at the end of the day, people are going to know that, and I think French is going to do well.
I agree. And there's good polling out today showing French Hill with a great lead or a good lead. Let's talk about Russia collusion. So isn't this really the left's attempt? I mean, really, they've been rejected, and now they want to make it about Russia. They want to delegitimize the American people, our will, who voted for Donald Trump.
Yeah, what I say about collusion in Russia, we've looked for collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. We haven't found any. We have found collusion between the Russians and the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Party. People forget this. But the Clinton campaign and the Democrats paid a law firm that hired a special group to go out and get dirt from Russians on Donald Trump. And they fed that into the FBI. That is the very exact thing that they're accusing Donald Trump's campaign of doing. They were doing. And there needs to be an investigation of that. We on the House Intelligence Committee, we've uncovered that. We uncovered that they had paid for dirt that they bought from Russians and funneled it into the FBI. And we expect DOJ and FBI to investigate that too.
They got the FISA warrant because of all that. I mean, essentially they bought. There's a lot of middlemen there, but they bought a FISA warrant. That's what it seems to me.
Well, I think the concerning part is that they would take dirt from a political campaign, get a warrant in a secret court on an American citizen, using that dirt from political operatives that ended up being totally false, not proven. That should have never been done. But they also gave it to the press, and the press ran news stories on it, and then they used the news stories to corroborate the dossier as if it was two different things. And that was totally wrong. And then we think the American people deserve to see the rest of what they used and the tools and techniques that were used to target the Trump campaign and Trump campaign associates. And that's what we're asking the president to declassify.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about that. Is the declassification that's been reported, is that going to happen this week, you think?
Well, we hear that they're working on it. We hear that they're trying to get the approval process done. I mean, the president has the power just to do it. We're hopeful. We wanted it done last week. There's rumors that it may be this week. we'll see, because we do have the hurricane that's coming to the East Coast. So,
do you think or believe the American people will ever see the full FISA documents and applications for themselves? Will those ever be declassified?
I do. I believe that they will.
Wow.
I do. Ultimately, I believe they will, and I think people will be surprised at what's there.
You recently made a trip to London. The media, I read some reports about that. They seem to think it was unfruitful and everything else. Was it unfruitful?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is what I typically deal with. I'm attacked by the left on a daily basis with totally preposterous stories that are outrageous, just total lies. So I was coming back from the Middle East and Eastern Europe. Stopped in London. We stopped and went to some of our military facilities that are out there about a couple hours outside of London. I had time for basically one meeting. Had a meeting with the Deputy National Security Advisor for the British government, which I was very proud, very happy to meet with him. And the next morning I left. So I was in London for a total of 14 hours. And I get home to goofy stories about to fake news.
I mean, it's a real thing.
It's what we have to deal with on a daily basis.
Well, I will tell you this. I talked about the opportunity to get to interview you, Congressman Nunes, for a while, and I asked a lot of our listeners, what should I ask him? And I got this back. Just thank him for his tenacity and his courage.
Well, thank you.
I mean, on behalf of the listeners of Conduit News and the people of Arkansas, I just want to thank you for being tenacious and courageous.
I appreciate that, and I hope people also know that having Rick Crawford on our committee, and he's not in the limelight like some of us are, but probably he's smart. He doesn't want to take all the attacks, but as chairman of the committee, I have to be on point. And it's if I didn't have good guys like Rick Crawford there to back me up, it wouldn't be as easy.
Congressman Devin Nunes, I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yes, sir.
All right, that was, again, an interview with Congressman Nunes and Paul Harrell. That was an exclusive right here on Conduit News Radio just a few months ago. So we're about to go to the break, but stay with us for the next hour. We have another great hour ahead. We're going to be talking about dark money. That was a really big topic this year. So, as it boils all down, what is dark money? The Cato Institute's Trevor Burrus came on the show this year and talked about dark money, what's protected, what's not protected, what people have to disclose, what they don't have to disclose. And we'll also give you new details on a fuel tax indexing law that may be proposed in the next legislative session. It's something that came out of the tax task force, and we have the new details on that. So stay tuned for the next hour. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul. We'll be back after this.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
And, I've been listening to some of his critics, and, the only thing that I keep hearing, kind of a common theme generally, is, President Trump he's not doing things the way you're supposed to do it in this town. And I think, wow, that's got to be kind of refreshing then. It's refreshing to me. It's refreshing to most of the country.
When you get outside the Beltway, I don't know that message is all that bad. But it's the chewing of the fingernails and sweaty brows up here in D.C. right now. It's this is a world all on its own. So I'll be glad to exit the place and hopefully go home for Christmas at some point. Mm-hmm. But I don't have any plans to return right at the moment. When this is a serious problem. The president is, they're trying to spin it. He's just trying to protect campaign promises, which he is trying to do that. But there's a major security issue on our southern border. There's enough fentanyl came across the border that was seized last year to kill 500 million people. Fentanyl is now the number one killer drug in the U.S., and we seized enough to kill 500 million people. 2 to 3 milligrams is a lethal dose, and you're only talking about a ton and a half or so of fentanyl that would kill that many people, and that's what we seized along the border. There are 10 people with terrorist ties that come across the border that are seized along the border every day. And for some reason, those numbers aren't getting out into the mainstream media. but it's a legitimate concern that the president has.
And it's certainly one, like you said, he campaigned on. And what's so wrong with fulfilling a campaign promise when that was your main point and that's why you got elected? I mean, you'd think even the Democrats, I mean, I know their base would revolt, but, you'd think there'd be some sort of consideration of like, well, this is what the majority of the people voted for. I mean, of course, they're going to say, well, it wasn't a popular vote, but, whatever. I mean, this is the way our system works, so.
And if people will look at this for what's really happening, so a lot of it has to do with Nancy Pelosi's speakership. She's trying to fulfill promises so she can get votes to be the speaker in the next Congress. And she wasn't even really in the conversation because we had the votes to pass the bill out of the House that she said we didn't have, and we showed her yesterday we did have the votes. But the original meeting where Schumer went to the White House to meet with Trump, she weaseled her way into that meeting, and then she's the one pressuring Schumer as much as anyone to hold out in the Senate because she's scared that if we pass border security funding, that it's going to cost her speakership in the House. So a lot of this is self-centeredness on Nancy Pelosi's part, trying to protect her own hide and her own political aspirations, and it has to do anything about the country.
Wow. Now, see, I hadn't heard that analysis at all. So you're saying that a lot of this has to do with the fact that Nancy Pelosi's putting pressure on Schumer to not, be more, persuaded to let the Democrats go ahead and vote and give the president what he wants, what he campaigned on, keep the government open. It's Nancy Pelosi. So you're saying that there's still a chance that there's some people in the Democrat Party that really are not on board with this Nancy Pelosi being speaker again.
Oh yeah, and it's been a lot of that's been published. She's made promises that she'll only serve for 4 years. She's doing everything she can to secure the votes she needs to be the speaker. To my knowledge, unless they've done it and it hasn't been reported, they haven't voted in their caucus yet on who their caucus is nominating for speaker.
Wow.
Which that usually happens the week after election. So she's still playing internal political games, and it'll be interesting to watch how hard the left really pulls the Democratic Party. I mean, the socialists, one step away from the communists that are in the Democratic Party now.
Yeah,
they're going to be pulling them very far to the left.
I think you're right.
There's some good Democrats up here that are they want what's best for the country. I mean, it's just like people want to paint with a broad brush.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the second hour of Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today. We hope all of you had a Merry Christmas, and a lot of people probably heading back to work today from that Christmas break. If you missed the first hour, go back and check that out. What we're doing today and tomorrow here on Conduit News Radio is recapping some of the top stories and top interviews of 2018 heard right here on Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. And in that first hour, we shared interviews with Judge Janine Pirro, with Congressman Devin Nunes, and also a really cool video from Paul presenting the gospel message as a Merry Christmas message. And that video was an exclusive Patreon video. And if you've never heard of Patreon before, it's basically a platform that allows people to contribute financially to what they see value in. And so Conduit News Radio has a Patreon page. And I just want to encourage anyone, if you're on your computer, if you're watching online on facebook.com/Conduit News, or you might already be at conduitnews.com watching live, just go to conduitnews.com, and at the top of the page there, you'll see a support button. Click that button, and you'll see all the options to become a Patreon subscriber. I'm a Patreon subscriber. You can get exclusive videos from Paul Harrell. And it's a way really to support the show and support the Liberty Machine here in Arkansas. And we've got a great second hour in store for you today. First, we'll get to discussion on dark money. That was a big issue all year long, as it was a campaign year here in Arkansas. And so the issue of dark money, so we'll talk some about that and replay an interview from the Cato Institute's Trevor Burrus on that topic. We're also going to give you some new details that we got just a couple of weeks ago from the Tax Task Force. And those details regarding what you might be doing right now is it affects your gas tax. That's right, the Tax Task Force is considering instituting what will be in effect a mandatory yearly tax increase on you at the gas pump. So we'll go over some new numbers that the task force issued last week, and we'll share an interview from an economist, Dr. Michael Busler, on what is a fuel index tax, and he breaks that down and talks to us about how, at the end of the day, really, that's a tax on you every year. It guarantees that your gas tax will go up every year. And so that's what the Arkansas General Assembly may be forced with tackling coming up in the legislative session, which will begin January 14th, so that'll be here before you know it. And by the way, Conduit News will be the hub for the latest on what is going on in Little Rock. So if you're not already subscribed and get emails, be sure to go there to conduitnews.com. You'll probably be prompted to sign up. But if not, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can type in your first name, your last name, and your email, and you can get subscribed so that you can get the latest in news and politics here in Arkansas from the Marble Palace. And so I mentioned just a minute ago, dark money. When you say that term, pretty much everyone knows what that is now. To the layperson, it's, okay, someone's buying a TV ad or radio ad or sending out mailers, and we don't really know who's behind it, right? And so in Arkansas, it really became prevalent in the Arkansas Supreme Court race, is where this idea of dark money came up, and Justice Courtney Goodson actually filed a lawsuit and won at the lower level in one of her lawsuits to try to stop free speech, because that's, at the end of the day, dark money is free speech, it's protected speech, it's political speech. And so she sued because she didn't like what was being said. And she sued. She won one of those, lost one of those at the lower court level. And for those who've been kind of tracking along, you'll know that just, I think, last week or the week before, a court here in Arkansas basically threw the appeal out because it was moot because the election was over. But that's probably going to be something we see over and over again. These politicians, whenever people speak out and say, hey, they voted for a tax increase, they might be suing now to try to stop, private groups from telling other people what they're doing with your money. And that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. Political speech is some of the most protected speech in this country. And when people put money behind that speech so they can get their message out there, that's also protected. So this idea of dark money isn't something to be feared. It's really something that needs to be protected and something we need to defend, in my opinion, because it is freedom of speech especially against our government that makes us such a great country. And so we wanted to share this interview about dark money. This is Trevor Burrus. He's an attorney with the Cato Institute. Actually, got to meet Trevor several years ago. A great guy, a funny guy. But he really breaks down the issue so that most people can understand dark money is not the enemy. Dark money is just free speech and a way people can get their message out there. And those who do not want the information get out there are the ones that have basically coined this term, dark money. So we're going to share this interview with you. This is Trevor Burrus from the Cato Institute right here on Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us. Folks, welcome to the program. We have Mr. Trevor Burrus on the line. Trevor is a Cato Institute scholar. He is a research fellow in the Cato Institute's Robert A. Levy Center for Constitutional Studies and the Center for the Study of Science, as well as managing editor for the Cato Supreme Court Review. His research interests include constitutional law, civil and criminal law, legal and political philosophy, legal history, and the interface between science and public policy. Please welcome Mr. Trevor Burrus. Trevor, it's great to meet you and have you on the program, sir.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk a little bit about this new guidance that the federal government is giving about nonprofits. You know, the New York Times, they call it dark money, that the U.S. is easing this dark money rule. What do you know about it?
Well, it's the greatest political salesmanship that I've ever seen. Just the term dark money, the people on the left really won some rhetorical points by naming this thing that no one really knows what it is, dark money. Generally, when we're talking about dark money, we're talking about a thing called a 501c4. So at Cato, where I work, we're a 501c3. We're an educational institution. We're not allowed to talk about, advocate for political candidates or for bills to be voted on or passed. But 501c4s are a variety of nonprofit organizations that can do a lot of some political advocacy and some education. They just can't be their primary purpose, cannot be political advocacy. And different groups can give to those, different corporations can give them, people can give to them. Some people can give to them for the purpose of political advocacy. So in 2014, the Obama administration said that on those organizations' IRS forms, they had to report those donors to the IRS, which the IRS was not going to make public or anything. It was just this sort of onerous, unnecessary burden on these organizations. And what happened last week was that they simply said, you don't have to do that anymore. And they're talking about 2.9% of political spending. Everyone tries to convince you that dark money, quote unquote, is a huge part of political spending. It's almost nothing. And it's just the left's continued war on political speech that it doesn't like.
I think you're exactly right. It's political speech they don't like. There's also some First Amendment applications here, right? I mean, shouldn't I have the ability to associate with who I want to associate with, and I should be able to give them money without having to report that to the government? I think that when you have to report it to the government, it makes you vulnerable for reprisals. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And on many levels, that's exactly what the left wants. They want to be able to get this information out there. And again, I want to point out the real irony of this. The organizations were required to give this information to the IRS, but the IRS was not allowed to publish it. So it's literally not taking any information away from the public unless it gets leaked by the IRS or someone gets it out of there, which has happened before. This happened with the National Organization for Marriage. They had their donors linked to it, then threatened. And the real irony here from why the left is not on board with anonymous speech and anonymous association is that the main case that the right to anonymous association came out of is a case called NAACP versus Alabama from the 50s, where the state of Alabama claimed that it needed to know the names and addresses of every person who supported or was a member of the NAACP. And, of course, in 1958, the reason the state of Alabama wanted that was so they could, put burn crosses on their lawn or attack them in other ways. And the Supreme Court says you have a right to anonymous association, and now the left doesn't believe that anymore.
Wow. They don't believe it anymore, and I'm just wondering, well, first of all, let's make clear. What you said in your opening statement was that this was something that was new. And so the idea that Donald Trump is he's basically just putting things back the way it was. That we need to make that clear.
Pre-Obama,
yeah, it's pre-Obama. We need to make that clear because the left wants everybody to think that the president is some sort of tyrant. When in reality, he's restoring things like putting the census question on, or the citizenship question on the census, and he's restoring things like, hey, maybe you shouldn't have to give your donors to the IRS, especially in light of what happened with that whole Lois Lerner scam.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's just absolutely no reason, and we've seen it. The other states who are trying to shut down political spending, left-wing states, and of course they're not trying to generally shut down left-wing political spending. They're really going after right-wing groups. But other states have tried to use this. When Kamala Harris was the Attorney General, who's now Senator, but when she was the Attorney General of California, she wanted to get that information from the IRS, and so every organization that was raising money in her state had to give that information to her. And we have seen with Americans for Prosperity in California, they had some of that information leaked, and they had their donors actually threatened. And they were able to win a case in court because they were able to show that they're actual threats, which is kind of the standard now, which I don't really like. I don't think you should have to show actual threats or try and keep yourself anonymous. But it going with that NAACP versus Alabama case, the court had said, well, you show actual threats, so you have a right to anonymous speech. But really, here's a bigger question. What is the most famous anonymous speech in the history of America? It's the Federalist Papers. They were published anonymously because it's a rich tradition. Almost all the framers wrote anonymously and associated anonymously. No one wanted to know who was signing the Declaration of Independence. They were giving away their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors. So it's an American tradition. And really just, the left doesn't like political speech in a variety of contexts unless it can control it and adequately shame people. We see that, for example, with the Mozilla guy. If he gives money to an anti-gay marriage campaign, he's going to get shamed and fired. And I always just ask on the left, just put this around, put the shoe on the other foot. If your views were ones that were unacceptable in your area, if you're pro-choice in the South, do you want people being able to publish that you're pro-choice in the South and having all your neighbors hate you and all this stuff? They just never ever think about the shoe on the other foot question that is essential to First Amendment doctrine.
I'm seeing kind of in my mind as you're talking, we're talking with Trevor Burrus, a Cato Institute scholar, kind of a linear line of progression here. And it's kind of just dawning on me for the first time. And we have had some politicians here in Arkansas call for the disclosure of donors when when these groups across the state maybe come out with scorecards that they don't like, and that sort of thing. And it really, I've never thought that dark money and this whole dark money, you heard it from when the Citizens United case and everything else, and this phrase that they use. Fast forward, if you take the concept of dark money as they interpret it and you equate it with trying to silence opposition and not have a legitimate debate, you can really fill in the gap of what's happened. And now we get to Berkeley. Now we get to, okay, we have a conservative speaker or Ben Shapiro or whoever coming to speak on our college campus, and we'll just burn the college campus down because we don't even want to hear it. We don't want to debate. And so when you advocate against the First Amendment, freedom of association, I really like what you're saying here, Trevor. You're essentially equating it to you are trying to silence opposition and not have a debate, which is what we have always embraced here in America, is let's have a debate about the issues.
Yeah, and the number one rule when it comes to First Amendment is that when a politician is trying to shut down political speech, should be very concerned about the politician's interest in this. And it's one of the ironies, we had Harry Reid when he was still in the Senate, going onto the floor of the Senate many, many times and complaining about the Koch brothers, which it's just, I was like, where did all the cynicism go? This guy whose job is to run for office, and if he's a public figure, people can criticize him. He gets on the floor of the U.S. Senate, which is sort of a platform he has, a broadcast on Senate, and complains about people criticizing him. And I feel like as Americans, we should be like, any politician, no matter what the party, if they come out and they say, I'm really going to complain about this group that's criticizing me because it should be illegal to make fun of me, or which at some points we have had laws like that, like the Sedition Act. Mm-hmm. The politicians, their biggest interest is in controlling their own message and shutting down people who are going to criticize them or calling them out in some way by labeling them dark money. The only way to have a really robust First Amendment and political debate in this country is to have participation be free and open, and if you want it to be anonymous, and have those rules apply to everyone at all times. Left-wing people can anonymously give to the Communist Party. Guess who was really into outing anonymous speech in the 50s? Republicans. They wanted to get all the people who were communists, and they wanted to make sure that their political giving was known. And so the shoe can always be on the other foot. And the only way to have this robust political debate again is to mistrust any politician who decides they're going to shut down or expose speech in the name of, quote, public good.
Mm-hmm. On the website here over at cato.org/research/campaign finance, it says this: by undermining competitive elections, campaign finance laws undermine democracy. Campaign finance reform distracts us from the real issue, the ultimate source of potential corruption, ubiquitous government. Government today fosters corruption because it exercises vast powers over virtually every aspect of life. It is any wonder that special interest, indeed, every interest but the general, should be trying either to take advantage of that or protect themselves from it. Can you expand on that a little bit, Trevor?
Yeah, so the problem with campaign finance, most campaign finance laws we have in this country didn't really exist until the mid-'70s. We had some other ones, some regulations on corporate giving, but not until the mid-'70s. And this was a very post-Watergate thing where they were worried about the cleanliness of government, and so they were worried about who was spending. And then we had a case. The ACLU was one of the plaintiffs saying that these restrictions on money are restrictions on speech. And that was the first thing where, going back to the skepticism about politicians, where you have this huge government which has a ton of favors and contracts and everything to give out. So one of the best ways of getting money out of politics is trying to get politics out of business and politics out of money. But if it's going to be involved in those things, you're going to see money flowing around, which is not necessarily a good thing. The hardest thing to convey to people when you're talking about campaign finance is many people just seem to think that giving money to a candidate or giving money to a political cause you believe in or spending it for your own speech is some sort of per se wrong. And that's not true at all. It takes money to publish, say, common sense, Thomas Paine's Common Sense, to try and change people's minds, to try and change the conversation. And you don't want that money to be controlled by politicians and have them decide who's allowed to speak because they have their own vested interest. And that's what we saw in the first campaign finance laws, is that if you have self-interested politicians who are complaining about people criticizing them, they can't just pass a law that says you're not allowed to criticize me. I mean, they're smart enough to know that would obviously violate the First Amendment. But they can pass a law that says you can't spend money or give money to an organization that comments on or supports a candidate within 30 days of an election. And that will support them. That will help them out. It will help out incumbents the most. Incumbents are, if you restrict campaign spending, incumbents are the most helped out. And here's exactly why. If you wanted to run for office tomorrow, or one of your listeners wanted to run for office tomorrow, and I'm not sure which the congressman is down there, but the congressman has name recognition, and the listener right now has no name recognition. So it's kind of like trying to start a business when the established business is in place. So what do you need when you start a business? You need startup money. You need people out there to give you $100,000 to get your campaign going so people can know your name, and whereas the person you're challenging already has that startup money. So if you restrict the spending, if you say, hey, I'm going to put a regulation on both me as the incumbent and the challenger to my position, and we can't raise more than $2,700 at a time, well, that's going to hurt the challenger more. And that's what we've seen since campaign finance laws came in. We've seen in many ways on the floor of the Senate, you have senators having said this, for the purpose why I'm passing this law is to shut down speech that's critical of me. And then you see an extremely high retention rate of incumbents. It's almost impossible to get an incumbent out of office. And if you really want to talk about what corruption is, it's government in this town, the swamp that never, ever gets drained because it's almost impossible to raise enough money to get someone out of office.
Wow. Yeah. I really, really appreciate those points, and I hadn't thought of that. I've talked about the power of incumbency before, but never in the context of the campaign finance laws and the limits on giving. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of businesses or successful business owners who see what's going on in Congress, and they might want to finance one of those and give a big lump sum, but they can't do that. I've never thought of it before, but you're exactly right. That really would. And it makes sense, Trevor, because Congress has such a terrible approval rating, and yet we reelect
Well, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very, very high percentage every 2 years.
95%, 90 to 95%.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it makes our political discourse stagnant. That you can't have people come in and shake it up. And when you do have people come and shake it up, it's people like Donald Trump or Ross Perot back in the day who are wealthy, who can spend their own money on their campaign, but they can't give that money to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, and certainly Donald Trump, President Trump, it definitely makes your point, because he is, if anything, I mean, say what you want, he is anti-status quo. He has shaken things up. I mean, the Republican establishment will now actually, disagree with the president now. You know what I mean? You used to never see that. Obviously the Democrats can't stand him, but I mean.
All right. Welcome back. That was an interview with Trevor Burrus of the Cato Institute, and the topic there was this idea of dark money. And I took some notes because this is a really, really important thing that we're going to face more and more of. And what Trevor talked about there is how the left, more so, but now you're seeing, everyone in the establishment, everyone gaining from growing government, they want to silence anyone who points out and criticizes them for what they are doing. And that is so dangerous, and they coin these terms like dark money to scare people and to think something nefarious is going on. He talked in there about how they use their own platforms to complain about these groups that are spending, their own money, their own time, to let people know, what is going on. So we've got to take a break, though, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul.
They're reasonable Democrats, but they're getting more and more marginalized in their party now. And you've got a growing pull to the left that's way out there to the left, almost unrecognizable. They talk about being liberal, but it's a modern sense of liberal. It's not the classic sense of liberalism and freedom.
Yeah,
it's a freedom without responsibility is what they're promoting.
We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. So what are your thoughts? I know it's impossible to predict, but you think we're going to go towards a government shutdown? I mean, that's what it looks like.
Well, we're headed that way. Fortunately, we've already funded about 75% of the government, which includes the military. And if, all these shutdowns we've had in the past, the people end up getting paid in the end.
All right, welcome back. We're about to have to go to a break right here in just a second, but you're listening to Conduit News Radio with Josh Waters. Stay tuned how your fuel taxes, the gas tax here in Arkansas, could be going up every year if a new law is implemented. The details on that after this break.
They're reasonable Democrats, but they're getting more and more marginalized in their party now. And you've got a growing pull to the left that's way out there to the left, almost unrecognizable. They talk about being liberal, but it's a modern sense of liberal. It's not the classic sense of liberalism and freedom.
Yeah,
it's a freedom without responsibility is what they're promoting.
We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. So what are your thoughts? I know it's impossible to predict, but you think we're going to go towards a government shutdown? I mean, that's what it looks like.
Well, we're headed that way. Fortunately, we've already funded about 75% of the government, which includes the military. And if, all these shutdowns we've had in the past, the people end up getting paid in the end. But I know that doesn't give some of those government employees a lot of comfort right now. But we're going to have to work out the differences and come up with some kind of a solution at some point. There's $5 billion isn't even the full amount it would take to secure the southern border. It's just money to do work down there, and the administration apparently has found funds
there will. Let me ask you about that. Let's say we go to a government shutdown, a partial government shutdown. I personally think if it gets to that point, Trump will try to go for the record of longer than like 21 days. That's just my personal feeling on it. But he has said 2 or 3 times now, and it gets reported, and then nobody really talks about it, that one way or the other, he's going to get his wall, and if that means using Department of Defense funds to have the military build the wall, he'll do it. Now, I mean, this is a novel idea, but do you think he can use that authority and have the military go down there and start constructing barriers?
I think there would be legal challenges to that. So that would have to be answered in the courts, but whether he would try it or not, I don't know.
Okay, so we'll have to see. We'll wait and see. I mean, the government. It looks. I mean, I think we will go to a partial government shutdown, and I really think it's. I think it's what the Trump base certainly wants, and I think it's pretty clear at this point. You know, President Trump tried to use the process that was there. He did get it out of the House, proving that Nancy Pelosi was wrong.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Right before the break, we're talking about this issue of dark money. And just to put a bow on this, what we heard in that great interview with Paul Harrell and Trevor Burrus was how politicians, people in power, people who control your money want to silence those who say maybe anything, but especially those who point out what they're doing with your money. And that is so dangerous. So I encourage everyone listening, if and when you hear the term dark money, just know that's carefully crafted language to try to scare you into silencing free speech. Dark money is free speech, it's political speech, it's protected speech, and it's not a bad thing. It is simply people putting money behind speech. And so that just wanted to put a bow on that, and because the left has done a really good job to try to scare people into thinking dark money is this nefarious thing. It's nothing more than free speech, and we should all support free speech. Speech with which you disagree, the cure for that is more speech. So if you're just joining us, this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today on Conduit News Radio, and all day so far, we've been recapping some of the top stories and top interviews that you heard right here on Conduit News Radio. We heard from Judge Jeanine Pirro, her interview earlier in the year. Congressman Devin Nunes. We heard just a few minutes ago from Trevor Burrus. And coming up here in a couple of minutes, we're going to replay an interview with Dr. Michael Busler. He is a professor and economist, and he had an interview probably a couple of months ago now, I think, in which he came on the show and was talking then about the idea of a motor fuel indexing tax. And the reason that is so timely now is because the Tax Task Force just issued some fiscal impacts on proposed draft legislation that may be coming in the 2019 session when they kick things off here in just a few weeks. Starts January 14th. And so what I wanted to do is get some new info, some new numbers on what you can expect possibly seeing as a gas tax hike here in Arkansas. And not only a one-time gas tax hike, but an ongoing mandatory yearly tax increase that is built into the law. And so what we're going to do for our online audience, we actually have the document. What this is, we'll pull it up for you, is a fiscal impact statement from the state of Arkansas. And this basically shows, okay, if they pass what they're calling a motor fuel indexing, is basically a guaranteed tax increase. Again, that's a guaranteed, mandatory in the law. Every year we have to raise the increase. And the reason they came up with that is they're saying, well, the cost of everything goes up. And so what they're going to try to do is tie everything in the gas tax to the cost of inflation. And so, if you're following along online audience, you can see some of the info there. But implement an index tax system on motor fuel and distillate special fuels consistent with growth rate changes in the consumer price index. So basically the rate of inflation. And each year on or before December 1st, so each year, the Department of Finance and Administration would determine the percentage by which the CPI for the 12 months ending increased. And so they would either increase the percentage growth or 4%, whichever is less. So you're guaranteed either whatever the CPI goes up on a yearly basis or a 4% increase. Now, if there's no increase in CPI for that year, there would not be an increase. But if there's not an increase in CPI, something really bad is going on. So that's probably likely to never happen. But let's get to the numbers. What does it mean for you, right? So in the year 2020, if they pass this, that's a total additional tax increase of $11.3 million. Okay? $11.3 million in the first year. And in 2021, these are numbers from the Department of Finance and Administration. So these are the government's numbers that they're giving us. We're just reporting them to you. In 2021, the total additional tax increase is $22 million. So $11 million in the first year, $22 million in the second year, and by the third fiscal year, $32 million. This is an increase in the gas tax, which affects you right at the fuel pump. And so the way they got that was basically they're estimating what they think the CPI growth is going to be. And so right now I have a chart pulled up on my end, and I'm not sure if everyone knew this, but Arkansas has the highest tax rate other than Tennessee of all the states that it borders. We're higher than Texas, we're higher than Oklahoma, we're higher than Missouri, we're higher than Mississippi, and we're higher than Louisiana. All the states that border us, we are already higher on the gas tax rate at 21.8 cents per gallon, okay? So that's where we're at, 21.8 cents per gallon, the highest in the region except for Tennessee. And under this draft legislation, under this fiscal impact statement for that, in the first year, the gas tax, under this new formula they want to implement, that would be a mandatory yearly gas tax increase. In the year 2020, we'd go from 21.8% per gallon to 22 cents per gallon. In the next year, we'd go to 22.5 cents per gallon, and by 2022, we would be at 23 cents per gallon. Okay, so and it's just going to go up and up year after year after year. Where it stops, nobody knows. But that's what they're looking at. That's a specific proposed legislation that came out of the tax task force. Really, when you think about it, that was one of the top stories of Arkansas politics this year. And we'll have some numbers tomorrow. Please tune in tomorrow to Conduit News Radio. We're going to have some numbers on how much has the tax task force spent. How much in per diem have legislators gotten? How much have they spent on consultants? How much have they spent on travel, bringing people in? We have those numbers. Conduit News FOIA'd those numbers. So tune in tomorrow for those numbers. But it might surprise you how much the tax task force is spent. So this is just one of the proposals, but it is one that will directly affect you on a daily basis. Maybe what you're doing right now out there driving on the roads. A mandatory yearly gas tax increase is what they're looking at. In the first year, $11.3 million increase, and then in 2 years, just 2 years down the road, up to $32 million increase. Now, I've just heard this. It's a rumor, but I wanted to share it because I think it's important. It's especially important for those listening on the affiliate Carve in the River Valley there in Russellville. The rumor I'm hearing is that the person who may sponsor this is none other than State Senator Breanne Davis. Okay, so it's a big election year. Everyone probably remembers the very contested primary between her and Bob Bailey down in the Russellville area at the beginning of this year. And so I heard a rumor. I don't know if it's true. Heard she might be the one to sponsor this legislation. So it got me thinking, I remember hearing on Carve, on the station people are listening to right now in the Russellville area. I remember hearing a radio ad and then a corresponding letter that was sent out that spoke directly to tax increases. And we actually have a copy of that letter. And we'll pull it up right here for our online audience. So this is, campaign mode versus maybe what's coming in the legislature, right? And we're going to pull up that letter, but, basically it said, well, here we have it right here. I'll read it verbatim for our online audience. Okay? And so when you look in, this is a letter that was sent out, Breanne Davis for State Senate. We're going to zoom in so people can get a better picture there. But what we got the zoom on. Okay. Let me pull it up here on my end real quick because I want to get this exactly correct. But again, what we're talking about is the gas tax increase and possible proposed legislation. And we, this is so important that politicians, what they say in their campaigns, that they're held accountable, right? And so that's what Conduit News is really all about. And so, let's see if I can, here. Well, here, let's take a quick break and we'll come right back. And okay, Joe, you got the language there about the no tax increases?
All right, so I got the letter over here and I can read it off of my computer screen. It says, I'm not going to read the person's name. It says, by now you've probably seen or heard my opponent's lies and distortions of my beliefs, positions, and my character. It's unfortunate that he has decided to run a campaign based on dishonesty.
Okay. I got here. I think the point I was talking about was right there in that second paragraph at the end. It talks about, what she's for and what she's against. And it says very clearly, this is her letter, I will oppose government waste and say no to any tax increases, which is great. We want all the politicians to say no to tax increases. So I just wanted to share that, just a rumor I heard. But it could come to fruition. But, that's one of the things. Always compare back what you hear from a politician in a campaign and what's on their mailers, what's in their radio ads, and then compare it to their voting records. At the end of the session next year, there'll be legislative scorecards. We can see exactly how people voted and compare it to what they said during campaign time. And so that's just one of many examples. But I wanted to share that because the gas tax is something that affects everyone, anyone that fills up their gas tank. And so a mandatory yearly gas tax increase is what could be coming. We detailed those numbers. And so just be on the lookout, and I would encourage you to contact your legislators now and let them know what you think about that. And this is just one proposal. We've heard they may, create a new tax in which they basically take the existing sales tax increase that was passed just a few years ago for roads and re-implement that as a new tax. And so just be aware this is going to be coming here in just a few weeks. So stay tuned. If you're not already subscribed to Conduit News, please go to conduitnews.com right now. And also, while you're on the internet, Conduit for Action, another great resource where you can get the latest and what is going on at the Marble Palace in Little Rock. Subscribe and get those email updates so that you know exactly what politicians are doing in your name. And so we're going to take a quick break right here, and when we come back, we're going to play a portion of an interview with an economist, Dr. Michael Busler, and what he had to say on what Arkansas is considering in this motor fuel indexing tax. So this is Conduit News Radio. Josh Waters filling in for Paul, and we'll be right back after this.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Are you a conservative-minded young person and want to let the world know about it? Are you tired of rolling your eyes as your professor regurgitates progressive, PC, neo-Marxist nonsense? Then you should interview on Conduit News Radio's Young Conservative segment and tell us about why you believe the way you do. Tell us how you came to be a conservative and what are your views on government. Now, if you're worried that your neo-Marxist professor may also be a right-wing talk radio listening masochist, then names can be changed to protect the innocent. It's the Conduit News Radio Conservative Future segment. To be interviewed, call 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
And now it is on the Senate, and so it'll be interesting to see what the optics are and how everybody responds. Congressman Bruce Westerman, tell me about the Walnut Grove Land Exchange Act.
Yeah, apart from the funding of the rest of the government for the fiscal year, there's been some good things happening here this week. It's just a bill that is in my affects a church congregation in my district, the Walnut Grove Community Church. They've had a church and a cemetery on this ground since the 1800s, before the Forest Service was ever established. And a later survey showed that their cemetery was on Forest Service land. So for over 20 years, they've been trying to swap out the land with the Forest Service. It could have been done administratively, but
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today on Conduit News Radio. And right before the break, we were talking about this idea that's being floated. There's some draft legislation out there, and there's even a fiscal impact statement out there on this idea of a mandatory yearly increase in the gas tax. Okay, and so what we wanted to do is today and tomorrow, like we talked about, we're showing some of the top interviews, talking about some of the top stories of 2018 as we head into the new year. And one of those interviews that is very timely again is an interview with Dr. Michael Bustler on what is the fuel index tax. So we're going to listen to a portion of that right now.
Well, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Always great to be able to talk to you every morning. I want to welcome back to the program. We have Dr. Michael Bustler with us. He's a public policy analyst, an economics expert, a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. You've probably seen him as a columnist at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Bustler, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really had a blast talking with you last week, and I wanted to have you on again because I'm looking over some of the stuff that Arkansas is thinking about doing, and I know there's a lot of ideas get proposed across the country at a state level, but one of those ideas that we're talking about here in Arkansas is moving away from a gas tax, a traditional gas tax per gallon, and going to indexing our fuel taxes. Can you tell us what indexed fuel taxes are?
Okay, so not all states, most states put a tax on gasoline so many cents per gallon, and they, in theory, use the revenue to help pay for road improvements and infrastructure. So your government officials are saying, look, we raise tax revenue to pay what we have to pay for, but every year, because of inflation, it costs us more to build the roads and the infrastructure. So in order to make sure we have enough revenue to do that, we're going to index the gas tax to inflation. In other words, if you put a 20 cent per gallon tax on gasoline and inflation is 3%, you're going to raise the 20 cent tax by 3%, and you're going to keep doing that every year to make sure there's sufficient revenue to pay the expenses. And that's the theory with doing it. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. It ends up guaranteeing that you get a tax increase every year, number one. And number two, going back to the theory as to why you need it in the first place, you could argue you really don't need it, because if inflation is 3%, then on average the price of gasoline is going to go up 3% also, so you're getting your increase anyway. This is a terrible idea. It's just a way to increase the amount of taxes that consumers pay. And remember, when you put a tax on any consumption, any goods that consumers purchase, if you put a tax on consumption, it's a regressive tax, which means the lower income earners feel it more than the upper income earners. So from that aspect, I don't think it's fair. It's something that's certainly not needed. My vote would be don't do it. The state of Maine had it in, and just recently, because it caused so much problems with consumers, just recently they decided to reverse it and just go back to how they had it before, a certain amount per gallon.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Maine. I'm going to look into that. So Maine had an index fuel tax system, and they've gone back the other way because it's, I mean, it's nice for people who want more and more revenue going to the government, and you're basically saying that this is going to enable, it guarantees them pretty much every year an increase in revenue from the people when it comes to paying for gasoline.
Exactly, and it affects the lower income earners the hardest, because most of their income goes to consumption. They don't, because they have low income, they can't save a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you put a tax on any products that consumers buy, any consumption, it's a regressive tax, and I don't favor regressive taxes at all.
Yeah, and folks, there's an article at the front page right now at conduitnews.com. It's a report on the task force on tax reform. And while right now it appears it's a net loss of revenue to the government, meaning more money back in the hands of the people, one of the proposals is to index fuel taxes, indexing them based on inflation rates of construction costs, the minimum of current year rate, max at 3% over the tax rate of the previous year. This could really drive more revenue in the long run over the future. So it certainly is a little bit of a red flag, and that's why I wanted to have Dr. Busler on to talk about this so he could explain exactly what this is and everything else. And so I certainly appreciate that. I want to get your take on, when we had you on last week, Dr. Busler, we talked a little bit about China and the tariffs and the.
All right, welcome back again. That was an interview with Dr. Michael Busler, a public policy analyst, a professor of finance, and you heard it from him. He said it was this idea, if you're just joining us, the idea that the tax task force issued some fiscal impact statements for, or the DFNA issued them for the tax task force based on some draft legislation that may be coming next session. And basically what it would do, it would guarantee a yearly increase on the gas tax. You heard Dr. Michael Busler there with Paul saying it was a terrible idea. It was a regressive tax, and it guarantees an increase in government revenue and taxes flowing out of our pocketbooks straight to the government. So that wanted to bring that to you, a very insightful and timely interview again, because just here in a few weeks, January 14th, the Arkansas General Assembly will be back in session. And I want to encourage everyone, if you haven't already, go to conduitnews.com, go to conduitforaction.com, subscribe, get those emails. You'll get action alerts letting you know exactly what's happening almost in real time at the Marble Palace in Little Rock, what the government officials are doing in your name. So it's been a great day here. If you're just getting in your car, just heading off to work, we've had a great show. We've highlighted some of the top interviews on Conduit News. And tomorrow we'll do a few more interviews highlighting Victor Davis Hanson, who was on just a few weeks ago. And we're also going to replay an interview with Dr. Jay Lear from the Heartland Institute. Also coming up tomorrow, casinos. That was a huge topic all year long, and it's probably going to be a big issue in 2019. Where do we end the year on casinos? What do things look like? And especially in Polk County. There's a really good interview we'll replay tomorrow about how things are a little more complicated there, because the people of Polk County have stood up and have basically put in a mechanism to try to stop casinos in their backyard. We're also going to highlight some of the top articles from Conduit for Action. Conduit for Action is just a wealth of knowledge on what is going on in Arkansas politics. So be sure you come back tomorrow and tune in to the show tomorrow for more of the top interviews of 2018. And for those listening over in Central Arkansas on 101.1 The Answer, we'll soon be celebrating a 1-year anniversary there in Little Rock as we head into the new year. And Conduit News Radio will continue to be on 101.1 FM The Answer. We're excited about that. So go tune in to conduitnews.com to get the latest. You can subscribe there, get live updates from the show. And during the legislative session, like I mentioned, I just want to really reiterate this. Go there, subscribe, get the emails to get the latest. And I wanted to end today just encouraging people, if you see value in what Conduit News Radio is doing, go online to conduitnews.com and click that support tab, and you can become a Patreon subscriber. I'm a Patreon subscriber. It's where you donate $5 a month, $10 a month, $25 a month. And you can financially contribute to the Liberty Machine here in Arkansas so that we can have a sustainable future in bringing people the information and the truth. And so go get on there, support through Patreon. You can also donate online at conduitforaction.org or conduitforcommerce.org. There's so many ways you can personally invest in the Liberty Machine in Arkansas and for a more prosperous Arkansas. It's been a great show today. I hope you tune in tomorrow. We'll be going over some of the top stories and interviews again. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell on Conduit News Radio. Everyone have a great day.